Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Global Mindfulness and Education Summit. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Kaira Jewel Lingo, who's joining us from Colombo, Sri Lanka. And she's going to share her wisdom. She's a person that I just love talking with and interviewing. She's been on some of the previous summits and has such a wealth of knowledge. So welcome, Kaira, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Helen. It's good to be with you again.
So I'll just tell you a little bit about Kaira's background. She's worked all over the world with meditation and mindfulness. She's one of the lead teachers with the Mindful Schools teacher training. She was an ordained nun with Thich Nhat Hanh for 15 years, and she's edited his books and written in one of my favorite books, Happy Teachers Change the World, which is a wonderful one, and also the book for children, Planting Seeds, which she edited, which has so many great exercises in it. So thank you again for joining us. So Kaira, first of all, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your journey into mindfulness, and maybe what was your first experience, even though maybe at the time you didn't know that was something called mindfulness.
Sure. Well, one that I remember particularly strongly was when I was 8. We were living in Nairobi, Kenya. My dad was working with others to do village and community development, human development projects there, and we were at the coast in Mombasa. And I remember lying on a large tree. The trees in coastal Africa are just huge limbs, and they go quite horizontal. So it was a very comfortable tree to just lie on and look at the leaves up above and the sky. And I remember being so content and still in that moment, really just taking in everything, the sounds of the crickets or the cicadas and the heat of the humid air, it was just, that experience is still so tangible to me. And I felt like I could have stayed there for hours, just being very mesmerized by the present moment of that experience. So that's probably one of my earlier mindfulness.
Right. Sounds beautiful. That sounds wonderful. Yeah.
It's funny how you just don't forget. Yeah, it imprinted so deeply. Yeah. Especially the feeling of having nothing to do, like I didn't need to do anything. I didn't have to make anything happen. Just totally resting and really feeling the support of that tree. Really like a refuge. So you asked about my journey with mindfulness. I think I had a deep spiritual yearning and longing my whole life to understand how our minds work and why we're here, and how we can, use this short time as meaningfully as possible to make the biggest difference for ourselves and others. So I was drawn to community. I was born into a spiritual community that had families living residentially, and it was kind of a monastic model, but for lay families in a Christian Protestant tradition. But we would practice every morning some kind of prayer, or be coming together to train station nearby. The bell of mindfulness in our tradition, where we breathe mindfully when we hear these sounds. So I grew up in a community that was really focused on spiritual practice and social engagement. And then I looked for communities like that in college. I lived in a cooperative, and then very soon after college, I joined this Buddhist community of Thich Nhat Hanh in France and became a nun shortly after for 15 years. And I really was motivated to learn how to be happy. I realized after finishing my master's and bachelor's at Stanford that I was well educated. I'd gotten a very good education, and I really appreciated my time there. I learned a lot, made wonderful friends, but I didn't feel like I had learned to be happy there, and that was missing, you know. And so I went to Plum Village, and on a kind of search that year, I traveled for a year, and part of that trip took me to Plum Village in France, and I was immediately impressed that here was a path. I hadn't really practiced Buddhism until then, and I practiced meditation, but not Buddhism, and I and just mindfulness, really, you know, learning how to be mindful in my daily life. That was what changed everything, and I was able to understand more how we create suffering for ourselves and how we miss opportunities for happiness, and how you know, we can create communities that practice joy and real supportiveness. So that's still my practice, even though I've decided to leave the community as a nun. I'm still practicing as a teacher in that tradition and a practitioner, and my full-time work is teaching mindfulness. And
oh, wonderful. It's amazing how life brings us to what we need as well, isn't it? So
yes,
yeah, what a wonderful story. So Kaira, tell us a little bit about what's happening in the mindfulness sphere in Sri Lanka. Is it very popular, or is it something that's growing?
It's definitely growing here in Sri Lanka, and it's kind of, I have to just say, you know, it's because of Sri Lanka that we have mindfulness
Yes.
at all. The tradition of you know, a Buddhist practice from which mindfulness has, you know, developed and been promulgated in the world. You know, it comes from India, but then was being lost in India, and it was revived in Sri Lanka. So we have these teachings thanks to Sri Lanka. So it's kind of weird to be trying to teach mindfulness here, where it stems in many ways, or where it was sort of, I mean, the first sutras were written down here on palm leaf. This was where the Pali sutras were first recorded. So anyway, but you know, this is a very, even though it's a mostly Buddhist country, it's a very multicultural society with a large Muslim and Hindu and Christian population. And so what's wonderful about the secular mindfulness movement here is that it includes everyone and those who have no religious affiliation. So it's being taught in schools, it's being taught in businesses, you know, whole, you know, banks that spread the whole country with, you know, hundreds of branches are wanting to train all their managers, and, you know, corporations, Google search inside yourself trainers train here. And there's, I have a good friend who teaches mindfulness in the prisons here. We taught together a course for a nonprofit, a mindfulness course for a nonprofit that works with slum children in Colombo. So it's happening in many levels of society, and I think it's going to keep growing because there's a real need. This is a very high stress country, even though it's an island and there's lots of beaches and it's tropical weather. I think Sri Lanka is like I can't remember, in the list of countries that are the most stressed, it's quite high. Okay. I don't remember the exact position. So I think not just because of stress, but because people are really looking to infuse their lives with greater meaning and greater a sense of connection and deeper understanding of, trauma also. There's a lot of trauma from the Civil War that's still in the population. So I think and I've met wonderful psychotherapists and psychologists that are developing mindfulness programs to help people, really heal trauma here in Sri Lanka. So it's widespread in the medical education. I have an associate who's been trying to bring mindfulness to the parliament. So, and yeah, being influenced by, inspired by the work in the UK and in other places, to connect Sri Lankan businesses, Sri Lankan politicians with the work of, Mindful Nation in the UK, or, the Mindful Leaders gathering every year in the US. So things like that. Yeah,
wonderful. That sounds amazing that, so many parts of society are coming together and hopefully can help the kids develop those skills and way of being for their futures. I think we're all so passionate about helping children all over the world, so it's really wonderful to hear. So Kaira, let's talk a little bit about the practice of sharing gratitude and noticing or appreciating others, and how that might shift some of our relationships.
Sure. Well, this is a topic I really love to talk about, because I think it's one of the things that's been most transformative for me in my practice, is really learning to harness our capacity for joy and for gratitude, which is a really potent energy that we all have, that's often sleeping underneath the surface, and we need to wake it up, and when we do, it shifts everything. So, I just want to really name that gratitude as a kind of resilience practice that, resources us when we really need support. And when we build it as a habit, we really have that to come back to when we need it. Just like, a well that we've been digging. When we need the water, it's there. Yeah. So I want to introduce a term called flower watering, which is used by Thich Nhat Hanh, my teacher. And the idea is that each human is a flower. We're a human flower. We have our good qualities, we have our skills, our strengths, ways we contribute and make our environment better. And that's our flowerness, that's our beauty. And just like flowers need water or wilt, humans also need to be recognized in their goodness, or we will also wilt and lose our freshness. So we can think of ourselves as gardens, and that we're also gardeners. So we need to take good care of the garden in our own heart and mind by watering the positive qualities and helping them grow, and avoiding watering the weeds, the seeds that cause suffering, but also doing that for other people who are also our gardens, and we're gardeners for other people's hearts and minds. So looking at how to really nourish the positive aspects in others and avoid nourishing the causes, the seeds of suffering that are in them. Because we all have the same seeds. We all have the capacities for great kindness and forgiveness and wisdom. And we also all have the capacity to be discriminatory, judgmental, violent, deluded, greedy. So it's up to us to choose and to choose environments that help us to nourish the seeds we want to nourish. So when it comes to school and work, in an education environment, there's so many ways that this, basic attitude and understanding can be useful and transformative. So just a general, taking a step back, a general framework is to cultivate an attitude of kindness, to cultivate, this intention to nourish what's wholesome in ourselves and others, in the smallest ways to the largest ways. So I know a friend who, when she was teaching, she had a practice of taking attendance and looking at each student. They would be doing their work. She'd be taking attendance. She would look at them and kind of silently beam a kind wish to them as she checked off their name, and specifically think like, oh, may so-and-so, do well in soccer today. Check.
Right.
May this young girl, feel accepted by her peers today. Check. So each, the occasion of taking an attendance was an occasion to cultivate kindness in that sense of really seeing, appreciating the humanity, the individual uniqueness of each student. So, yeah. So I have more stories, but go ahead.
It's wonderful, and I love that it was just a private kind of thought that she wished on the students, and I think just that energy, people can feel it, and it's a great way to to take a mundane task of attendance and kind of make it more meaningful. So yes, please share some other ideas with us.
Sure. Well, this is something that is in the book, both Planting Seeds and also Happy Teachers Change the World, and that is to teach this as a classroom activity. So I have a friend, and she tells this story in Planting Seeds. She's a teacher in Germany, and she had her students write down, she gave every student a list with every student's name in the class, and she asked them to write down one thing they appreciated about each student, just one sentence, one line per student. And then she compiled all of the things everyone said about one student and gave it to them as a list. And this happened about halfway through the year. And she said the atmosphere in the classroom completely changed when people could read what everyone thought about them, that, what they appreciated about them. She said there was more trust. There was less conflict. It was much easier to manage the class. There was more joy, more togetherness, more, cooperation. It was like, people could, feel more at ease. One of the things that I think is so powerful about expressing gratitude and appreciation in general, as well as specifically to other people, is that it makes us pay attention. And there's this lovely quote from a teacher named John Tarrant that says, "Attention is the most basic form of love."
Right. Wow.
So expressing our appreciation for someone means we're taking time to notice them, and we're offering them our love. So when you get that from 30 people in your classroom, it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't go away in just a day. Like that sense of being really, held and cared for by others becomes kind of this undertone of the group dynamic. Yeah. Another story is I was teaching a parents' mindfulness class. This was when I was living in Washington, D.C. And this was with low-income families. Many had not been exposed to mindfulness at all before. And there was a lot of stress, a lot of hardship that the families were going through. And the last class, we invited everyone to they took turns, and they'd come in the middle, and we'd go around in a circle and each kind of shower them with a few words of appreciation. And I will never forget this occasion because people were so moved. People were in tears to have, it's like they'd never had anything like that before, where people took time to say what they appreciated about them. Life was so harried and stressed, and there was so much that had to be done, and they'd never, it was like a ceremony. We didn't really intend it to be something like, you know, like that, but it became this sacred thing where nobody wanted to leave. Like we were supposed to end the class and everyone just stayed because this energy had been released of like goodness from everyone, where people were able to, you know, really feel and see. You know, sometimes what's powerful with appreciation is people had never been appreciated in that way before, so they didn't even know that about themselves. They didn't see that they were good in that way. So when other people take the time to show them, they discover something about themselves, and they touch into a power that they didn't know that they had. It's enormously empowering and strengthening to have people just tell you sincerely. It was not flattery, you're not making things up, but sincerely tell you what they appreciate about you. I mean, you could just feel, you could see people were like 10 feet taller when they left.
Right. Yeah, that's
so
beautiful.
that was a really, really powerful experience of, you know, how we can just lift each other up. It doesn't take money, it doesn't take, you know, fame, it doesn't take, you know, power, like simple people just really appreciating who we are, the goodness in our hearts. So that was one. And then, you know, this school in the UK called the Dharma School in Brighton, we visited when I was a nun. There are people that, monks and nuns who go from Plum Village every year to offer practice there, but it's a school that teaches mindfulness as kind of the heart of its curriculum. So we had been with the kids, and then we also did a program with the teachers. I remember I visited a class for 6th graders, and there was a 10-year-old, I think it was 5th graders, maybe 10-year-old boy. During the break, he went to his locker and carefully pulled out this drawing that they had done at the beginning of the year. He unfolded it. It was a flower. Each child had their name in the center of the flower, and then there were petals in the number of all the kids in the class, so maybe 10 petals in their class. So he showed me this drawing, and every petal was a positive quality that another student had said about him. And he took it out like it was something holy, and he showed it. He was like, "Are we gonna do this again?" It was so sweet, and they had done that 6 months ago, and he was still just treasuring this. Oh, it was just so sweet. So that was a very powerful reminder of these things make a big impact, and they really, you know, they shift a child's feeling of safety or security in a class. But in that same school, we went on to do what we call beginning a new practice with the teachers, which was basically a chance to do flower watering. So we sat in a circle with the teachers, and we invited them to express what they appreciated about each other. And, you know, we had started in the afternoon. People were tired. It was the end of a week, and, you know, the energy was on the lower side. But as people began to share, you could feel the energy shifting and this sense of refreshment coming into the circle, and like laughter and tears also, of like people recognizing each other's sacrifices, and, you know, this just really taking time to nourish the relationships, because life is so full and so busy and so packed that many things happen that are good, and we often don't have the time to recognize them. And in that way, we don't actually stop to notice what's going well and what we want more of. Yeah. So all the good things get sort of trampled underfoot. But when we stop to just see this is really what is worth celebrating in my colleagues, in my work environment, then it gets stronger. That habit gets stronger, and then it's easier to make it repeat or to, have it be a bigger part of your group experience. So people were very also energized and grateful that we had taken time for that. And they said, we really need to do this on a regular basis. And that's the recommendation with flower watering, that, as a group of colleagues or in your classroom, that it becomes part of the culture where you regularly take time to express gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah, that is so moving to hear those stories, and I just love. I think we don't realize how much of an impact it can have when we express what we're appreciating and feeling, and so often maybe because of our own vulnerability we don't share that with others, or we just assume maybe that they know how we feel about them. So I love those exercises. I think it sounds wonderful. Like very.
And to your point too, I just want to say we're so good at saying when things don't go well, right? That's what we're very trained to do, is to say something when there's a lack or people aren't meeting our expectations, but we're not as well trained to recognize all the things that are going well. I just want to tell one other story that occurs to me too, because it's a slightly different context where expressing appreciation turned a situation around when it wasn't going well.
Okay.
So this is a friend of mine who is a midwife and a kind of activist in Cape Town in South Africa. She was part of starting the Compassionate Birth Project. So helping, midwives and birthing centers to really surround mothers with, care and compassion when they're giving birth, because that has a big impact on, infant mortality and maternal health after the birth. So there was widespread complaints from patients about just the mistreatment that they were getting at the hands of super stressed midwives and nurses, and a very resource limited health system that hadn't, been well trained in like the needs of a neonatal, like right after birth, like, the need for real sensitivity and quiet and bonding with the mother. Anyway, so my friend in this project, they took all the staff of this one birth clinic that was open to doing this, not just the midwives, but the cleaning staff, the administrative, secretarial staff, everyone who worked there went on this weekend retreat, and they did self-care practices. They didn't say anything about the things that needed to be changed, that they weren't doing well with their patients. That wasn't the focus. It was on nourishing them through singing, through massage, through mindfulness, through connection, nourishing the flowers in them, helping them to get in touch with their, deeper intentions and wishes for their lives, for their work, but really like caring about them, helping them really release stress and find joy. And I just read this. After that weekend, there were no complaints from patients for like the next 3 to 6 months. It was a complete 180-degree change, not from saying what wasn't going well, what needed to be corrected, but by nurturing the good, because then that just overflowed on to the patients in their work. So just another example of how, powerful taking care of the good seeds actually, without doing any work to the seeds that cause suffering, just makes them, recede, because the other ones are getting all the sunlight and the water. Yeah,
I love that. That's what a beautiful story. And like as you said, we tend to focus on the what's not working, and instead of the good, and letting that kind of overflow and take over. That's an amazing story of that kind of huge shift without addressing any of the issues. I think that's so powerful. So, Kaira, tell us a little bit about how you practice this in your own daily life.
Sure. So I'll first share something I did in the past, and then how I practice it now as well. As a nun, Thich Nhat Hanh encouraged us to write love letters to those in our lives, to really sit down and think about the different qualities that we really appreciated that made this person precious to us, to not take them for granted. And so I decided to do this when my dad turned 69. I decided to write him 69 thank yous. And I thought, oh, that's a lot. I'm not sure if I can manage. And then as I started writing, one thing led to another, and it was like a snowball. And so many things that I was grateful for were just flowing out of me that I never thought to thank him for, like doing my hair as a child, doing my diapers, making sure I went to the dentist and teaching me to like brush my teeth every time before I would go to the dentist. You know, encouraging me to give donations at the end of the year, and, you know, apologizing when he had done something I called his attention to that was unskillful. You know, being really welcoming of my friends, just many, many things that throughout my life that I realized were not, you know, things I wanted to take for granted. And so I felt really different after I wrote that letter. Like, I realized what a wealth of a father I had. Yeah. And so I gave him this letter on his birthday, and of course he really appreciated it. He told me that he takes the letter with him wherever he goes, and when he's not feeling good about himself, he reads it and it makes him feel better. And so you know, he wrote a love letter then to my brother on his birthday. And, you know, I think my brother wrote a love letter for someone anyway, and I tried to keep doing it. I did it for my mom, but I always share the story, and I'm often, you know, sometimes years later, someone will email me and say, you know, I wrote that letter for my mother, for my sister, for my daughter, for my husband, and it made a huge difference for them. I'm often getting stories like that of people who, and you can do it even for someone who's passed away. Like, they don't have to be alive. It can still make a difference. And so one story someone shared with me was another sister. She was French, and she said she wrote a letter like this for her dad when he turned 50. And he said to her, I've been waiting for a letter like this for my whole life. Wow. And I understood from that, you know, there were certain things that nobody had recognized in him until she did. And so I really was moved by that, because, you know, it reminds me of, like, in the pyramids, they found grains, you know, seeds of grains that don't grow anymore, like ancient grains, but that can still grow now in the right conditions. They've been preserved in these tombs for like 5,000 years. And it makes me think, you know, there are these seeds in each of us that maybe no one has ever seen come to light. Yeah. But maybe just one person in our life sees that part of us. And only if they water it will it come to fruition. So we have to make sure we don't leave those seeds unwatered in the people close to us, because we might be the only one capable of helping that to flower. Yeah. So that's the practice that I've done myself, and I try to encourage people to do and make a habit myself. And one of the things now, I live with my partner here in Sri Lanka, and we're trying to make a regular habit on Sundays of sitting down and sharing our gratitude for each other. Just sharing our gratitude. What we in the recent past have appreciated, or even just things in general about the person that we really appreciate. And it's a really important thing, I find, because, you know, when I mentioned resilience at the beginning, if we have a habit, you know, of hearing these things from each other, then when we get into an argument, or when I do something or he does something that disappoints the other, knowing we've had that, you know, expression of appreciation, it keeps the balance. Like, yeah, okay, that thing hurt, or that thing was unskillful, but there's all this that we know is good and that we regularly take time to express, so we don't get into this negativity, like, oh, he's so, yeah, you know, bad, or so the gratitude just kind of, okay, this was disappointing, or I'm upset, but, you know, it's not that we suppress the difficult feelings, but the gratitude really helps not to, you know, because you can overemphasize that in someone. You can start to get like obsessed about their negative qualities, which is really, it takes you down a really dark path, and it doesn't reflect an accurate picture of them. So I find that having the gratitude practice on a regular basis just helps when things are rough. It just gives a bit of buffer around that rough patch.
Yeah, beautiful. I love those examples. Yeah, it's my father's 75th birthday is coming up, and I was thinking, what can I do? So now I will start to write that letter.
Nice.
Like, that's beautiful. And I love what you said. You know, that the more you do this, the more it just kind of becomes natural and grows. And as you mentioned, you know, I don't know, we tend to see the negative, I think, sometimes. And like you said, some small habit that really isn't important can irritate us or do something. But yeah, just remembering all those good things is so important. So thank you for sharing those.
Sure.
So Kaira, can you share one more practice maybe that really resonates with you, or you feel is important in your own life, or in Sri Lanka, or in the work that you do?
Sure. You know, I think being, you know, taking a pause before I eat, and thinking about what I'm grateful for. And I'll often invite, if I'm eating with others, I'll invite us all to just share one or two things that we're grateful for. And sometimes we'll hold hands if they're the hand-holding kinds and kind of people. If not, that's fine. But a sense of just pausing and tapping into what's, you know, could be very general things like, you know, I'm in good health. It could be, you know, really specific things, you know, I'm glad my friend who is ill is in a good place right now, or, you know, and so we'll share our gratitude. And, you know, I do this with kids a lot, with my little nieces. When they visited me in DC for 2 weeks, we'd start every meal sharing what we were grateful for. And if I forgot it, they would remind me. They really got into it. And then it really came in handy when they were in a bad mood or when they weren't feeling good. They would, I would ask them who are they, you know, what is it about each person in their life that they're grateful for? And that really began to shift their mood, and they felt better and happier and more balanced as we did that reflection. And we were on our way to a family reunion in Atlanta. So the first morning it was 20 people, and it took a long time to get breakfast going. And we finally had the whole table set with this kind of feast, soul food meal. And everyone was hungry. It was late. And the girls, these three sisters, they said, wait, you can't eat yet. And we said, well, why not? They said, well, we have a game we want everyone to play. So we were all seated around the table, and they gave everyone a piece of paper. And they said, okay, on this piece of paper is the name of a different family member at the table, and you need to say something positive about them. So we started our meal with everyone saying one thing positive about the person whose name they had gotten. This they came up with completely by themselves.
Right. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and it was, we'd never done that as a whole family, and it was a beautiful thing to start our time together for our reunion. And they came up with that, and it came from seeing the power of expressing gratitude before each meal.
Yeah, I love that. So creative, and what a great idea. It's like Secret Santa, but with different gratitude.
Exactly.
A gift for everyone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all your ideas and wisdom. I always love talking with you, and
thank you, Helen.
Getting so many inspirations, and really feels very joyful when I connect with you. So thank you again for coming on the summit. And just want to remind everyone, we'll have the books that Kaira's edited, and also her website. She runs and is involved in many courses, and she's kindly provided a guided meditation for us.
And I'll also add one for kids. I'll put one that's about appreciation, about growing appreciation for kids. So that'll be in the gifts as well. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Yeah. So make sure to check those things out. And again, we really appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thank you, Helen. And I really appreciate the work you're doing to bring mindfulness into education. Thank you. And Chris also. Thank you.
Thanks.